The Young and the Restless spoilers, shock title, A Night of Chaos, the wrath of Daniel and Sharon's downfall. The tension in the room was palpable as Sharon finally confessed to everything, her lies, her manipulations, and the countless lives she had harmed. For Daniel, this was the breaking point. The weight of her actions bore down on him like a tidal wave, and he snapped. His voice cracked with anger as he screamed, "You think you can get away with everything you've done? No, you need to pay for this." Sharon stood frozen, her face pale, yet her lips trembled with a weak defense. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I don't want to go to prison. I'm not well, Daniel." Her attempt to justify her actions only fanned the flames of Daniel's fury. "Not well? You're blaming your sickness for all this? That doesn't erase the pain you've caused," he roared, his voice echoing off the walls. His hands clenched into fists as his emotions boiled over. The breaking point, before anyone could react, Daniel lunged at Sharon, his hands wrapped around her throat, his rage consuming him. Sharon gasped, struggling to free herself, but the anger in Daniel's eyes was blinding. He had lost control. Suddenly, Nick burst into the room, his face stricken with panic. "Daniel, stop," he shouted, pulling him away with all his strength. "This isn't the way." Nick's intervention created a moment of tense silence, but it did little to extinguish Daniel's wrath. "You think sitting down and talking about this is going to fix anything?" Daniel spat, pacing the room like a caged animal. "She destroyed lives. She can't just walk away because she's sick." Nick tried to reason with him. "She needs help, Daniel. She's not in her right mind." But Daniel wasn't having it. "Stop using that as an excuse. She knew exactly what she was doing." A moment of no return. As Sharon stood trembling, Daniel reached into his pocket. His hands were shaking, but his resolve was firm. He pulled out a gun. The glint of the metal under the dim light sent a chill through the room. Nick's eyes widened in horror. "Daniel, don't do this," Nick pleaded, stepping between him and Sharon. "This isn't justice, it's revenge, and it's not going to fix anything." Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes as he raised the weapon. His voice cracked with pain. "She deserves this. She deserves every bit of it." Sharon's knees buckled as she clutched her chest, fear consuming her. Yet she found the strength to speak. "If this is how it ends, maybe it's what I deserve," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Daniel's finger tightened on the trigger. His hands trembled, but his resolve didn't waver. A deafening bang echoed through the room. Sharon cried out, clutching her stomach as blood seeped through her fingers. She collapsed to the ground, her breath shallow and labored. The aftermath. Nick lunged at Daniel, wresting the gun from his hand. The weapon clattered to the floor as Nick pinned Daniel against the wall. "What have you done?" he shouted, his voice filled with equal parts anger and disbelief. Daniel broke free, his face a mix of guilt and sorrow. "I couldn't let her get away with it," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Tears streamed down his face as he bolted out of the room, disappearing into the night. Meanwhile, Nick rushed to Sharon's side, his hands pressing against her wound in a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me, Sharon, stay with me," he begged, his voice shaking. Paramedics arrived moments later, carrying Sharon out on a stretcher. Her pale face was etched with pain, but she managed to whisper, Don't blame Daniel. I deserved this. I did terrible things. If I don't make it, promise me, don't hurt him." The hospital and a shattered soul. Hours later, Sharon lay in a hospital bed, her condition critical. Doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize her, but the damage was severe. Her words echoed in Nick's mind as he sat by her side, his hands clasped tightly together. Despite everything she had done, he couldn't bring himself to hate her entirely. Sharon's words to Nick were haunting. "If I survive this, it won't be for me. It'll be for everyone I've hurt. But if I don't, maybe it's for the best. Tell Daniel, he doesn't need to run. I forgive him." Daniel on the run. Meanwhile, Daniel found himself alone in the darkness of the night. The weight of his actions pressed heavily on his shoulders. He had acted out of anger, but now that the rage had subsided, guilt consumed him. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind. The sound of the gunshot, the look of pain on Sharon's face, and Nick's horrified expression. As sirens wailed in the distance, Daniel knew he couldn't stay. He had crossed a line he could never uncross. But even as he fled, a part of him hoped that Sharon would survive. Not because he wanted forgiveness, but because he couldn't bear the thought of having blood on his hands. The fragility of redemption. Sharon's fate hung in the balance, and Daniel's future was uncertain. Their lives, once tangled in a web of deceit, had now spiraled into chaos. But amidst the darkness there was a sliver of hope. A chance for redemption, a chance to heal, a chance to make things right. Whether or not they would seize it remained to be seen. And as the sun rose over Genoa City, the echoes of that fateful night lingered, a stark reminder of the cost of anger, the fragility of forgiveness, and the unrelenting pursuit of justice.